And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Copyright 2.0 show, episode number 338. My name is Jonathan Bailey. I am from the website Plagiarism Today, which can be found at plagiarismtoday.com. And joining me, not quite as usual, but he's usually here, he's here in a different format. It is Patrick O'Keefe at the iFroggy Network at iFroggy.com. Patrick, how are you doing? Digging the new digs?
Yeah, I'm on the road. I'm visiting some friends. I'm going to visit Brandon Ely tomorrow. And yeah, I'm in Atlanta, which is actually an Aereo market. Currently an Aereo market on their website. We're going to be talking about Aereo a lot today, but I thought that was kind of ironic. I'm in Atlanta, and that was actually one of Aereo's markets. And of course, today we had the Supreme Court ruling and not favorable for Aereo. But anyway, down here to visit Brandon, hang out this weekend, and so. Internet here at the hotel is not very good, and we're going to have we have a big delay between the two of us, so when we're talking over each other, or if that happens, that's what's going on. I mean, I guess we're going to try our best, but yeah, good to be here, and it took a lot of things and a comedy of errors just to get on the air today to do this show.
Yeah, I want to, for everyone at home, I want to say Patrick has moved heaven and earth to be here today with us. He has really done more than should ever be asked of a co-host of a podcast like this. He has done it willingly and with a smile on his face. So, Patrick, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, I came prepared. I came with my backup mic here, my Audio-Technica 2020. It's like a $200, $300 mic. I forget what it is now. It's probably cheaper. But then I should say actually, because this is like I'm endorsing it. They were kind enough to send me this for free. I met them at Sci-Fi Southwest years ago, and I said I was a podcaster, and so. There you go. So I got that mic, and so I have decent audio, hopefully, but it's going to be a little delayed. Beyond that, happy to be here. Welcome back to America again, Jonathan, as of not a few days ago at least. And yeah, what'd you do?
Yeah, basically I was in Newcastle, England, for the 6th International Integrity and Plagiarism Conference. Sort of one of the, it's probably the biggest, I think it's the biggest and probably the most, I guess you would say, multinational. Others are kind of regional affairs, but it's the Academic Integrity and Plagiarism Conference. I gave
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. I gave one workshop session, chaired 2 other sessions, and also did the closing notes for the entire event. So it was a great time. Was very involved. Really had a great. It was great to see. 'Cause, there's a lot of people out there, like Dr. Mike Reddy, Dr. Deborah Weber-Wolf, Tracy Brettog, and others that I talk to constantly or nearly constantly via email and phone and whatnot, but never get to see face-to-face. And this is my chance. Every 2 years we get together. This is our time to meet face-to-face, and usually it involves, copious amounts of discussion of plagiarism and some kind of weird dinner thing that we all go to every year, because they always do some kind of special and amazing dinner event at this conference. So yeah, it's a really, really cool time, and I always look forward to it.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was a really good conference this year. Really enjoyed it. The organizers, as usual, did an amazing job putting it together. They've kind of got a groove going. It's every 2 years. They hold it in the same place, same city, same venue, pretty much now, and they've got it down. They've got a rhythm to it. And a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you hold it in different places? Why don't you move it? But there's a rhythm to it. There's a cadence to it, and you know what to expect. And it's been getting better and more fine-tuned every year. I don't know if I see a reason to move it. So
yeah,
I don't know. Well, honestly, Patrick, I know why the people have tuned in today. So let's, you'll just dive into the issue at hand, the issue before us, Aereo.
I think we should, I would like us to not talk about Aereo. I would like us to just talk about other stories of interest, and not cover Aereo whatsoever. Because what can we say that won't already be said 10 million times?
That is true. That part actually is pretty accurate. If you have been conscious today, long story short, you probably have heard about the Aereo ruling. long and short of it is, Aereo is, I'm not sure which tense I should be using here currently. They haven't shut down yet, but yeah, it's impending. They currently are a TV streaming service that's specialized in capturing over-the-air broadcast television. They did it on a series of these tiny little antennas, supposedly about the size of your thumbnail, and one per customer, and they took that information and they recorded on DVRs and streamed it to customers via their service, and they charge $8 to $12 per month for the right to do so. And as a result, they drew the ire of broadcasters, Fox, ABC, CBS, NBC, etc., who sued them, not just in one or two markets, but in multiple markets. And it seemed initially like Aereo was going to win the day. They had won lower court rulings in most of the cities, and it also won a Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruling in their favor, had one of those in their favor, on the grounds that, hey, this isn't a public performance of the copyrighted work. That would be infringing. This is just a lot of private performances, individual private performances of the work. Eventually, the broadcasters filed a petition with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court took it up, which kind of surprised a lot of people because there was no real circuit split prior to then. Only once the appellate courts had ruled. But the Supreme Court took it up, and we got the ruling today, and it was 6-3 against Aereo. So, yeah, things not looking too good for Aereo right now.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. You know, they lost. It's a beating. You know, the CEO and Barry Diller, one of the, primary kind of face investors behind Aereo, noteworthy in his own right, both have said that if they didn't win this case and it's over, there is no plan B. Aereo is a well-funded startup. It's got some impressive backers. I'm sure some smart people, and so they have the opportunity to pivot. Probably, I'm sure there's no shortage of cash. I mean, this is a successful service, like to at least some margin. In the markets they've launched, they have subscribers, they have paying subscribers, they have people paying to use the service, and so they have money in the bank. I'm sure if they could pivot in some way, and of course, it makes no sense for them to talk about a pivot beforehand. It makes no sense for them to kind of hedge their bets. They expect to win the case, and they have been fairly successful in the courts thus far, up until this sweeping defeat. But now that they have lost, maybe there is an opportunity for them to pivot. On the other side of it, I look at the broadcasters, and it's a big victory for them. One would hope that they would see Aereo and maybe get an idea of other ways to share their content with a paying audience, rather than someone who's just trying to stream content off of some sort of streaming service online that's illegal. I don't know. It's lucrative for them to have these broadcast rights, so they're going to probably keep them in as few hands as possible moving forward. But I would hope that they look at something like Aereo and they see there's demand for a service. So how can they make it legal and bring in people who want to cut the cord and who might just buy their own antenna and get a few bucks from those people? Is it worthwhile? I don't know, but clearly there's a demand for this service, and people were interested in Aereo.
Yeah, there's definitely, especially among the tech-centric, there was an interest in Aereo, and one commenter on one site pointed out, I think correctly, that the ruling doesn't make Aereo illegal. It just says what they've been doing up until now is an infringement. If Aereo can settle that dispute and maybe pay the royalty rights or work out some deal with broadcasters, they can continue moving forward. Now, that's much easier said than done for a lot of reasons. Yeah. It's not just the broadcasters that get sole say here. I mean, these broadcasters have their deals with sports broadcast, sports organizations and whatnot. They're completely separate and could throw a monkey wrench in this pretty horribly. But if they could, they theoretically could continue operating.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because if and I look at Aereo, and I really, there's disagreement over this, and it was kind of one of the hinging points of the case. Them arguing as an equipment company makes a lot of sense. But if they go the route where they have to pay rebroadcasting fees, and of course that varies by what's available over the air in the given markets, but if you go that route, then the service becomes more expensive. And you go back to the bundles, and at the end of the day, you lose the people who are interested not in bundles, which is a lot of people, and not paying $80 a month for 3 channels that they really watch. So I think it's tough, and I think the cable industry and these broadcasters are in large part, really holding on to that model because it makes them money. And I guess we'll see moving forward if people continue to cut the cord as you have, and if I have Dish Network right now, and I'm not sure that I would really see the need to keep it in the future, next few years. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. But for more and more people, it makes sense to cut the cord. And as long as they can get that money, they'll continue to get that money. And that's part of the reason why they felt the need to really go so hard after Aereo, because it represents a disruption of that model and an attack on one of their biggest, if not their biggest, revenue sources, depending on the business.
Yeah, and
Disney is not much, or CBS is a lot more.
It's worth noting that the revenue stream to broadcasters for the retransmission rates that paid by cable companies and satellite companies is estimated to be between $2 and $4 billion. No one knows the exact amount, but it's multiples of billions.
Right.
That's per year. So
they're going to protect their golden goose to some extent, and can't blame them. Funny thing is, though, Aereo, you know how we talk about cases and you see people as the bad guy and the good guy, right? Yeah. I don't see Aereo as a bad guy here. I have to say, I see Aereo as a creative company, and I see Aereo as coming up with a solution that, let's be clear, some people will put this as Aereo just got their butt kicked, but at the end of the day, it's 6-3, 3 dissenting opinions. The dissenting opinions basically decided that they were an equipment company and didn't really care for where this could go down the line. I guess in a couple months, or actually no, soon we'll get a more fully formed opinion from what I read in one article, where they'll be, careful not to impact the quote-unquote cloud services. But Aereo, I think, is a smart company, creative company. I don't see them as being slime balls or people who were out to steal from anyone. I think they just saw an opportunity to provide a service, and in this case, the Supreme Court shot down that service. That might not be the case in all countries. It almost certainly would not be the case in all countries, but in this country, it is. And again, I feel like there's plenty of opportunity to innovate within the broadcast television basic channel market, if you want to call it that. I know you've said many times you don't watch those channels, and a lot of people don't. Yeah. A lot of people do, however, and a lot of people would pay for some convenience who don't want to pay for cable. So again, I think it was an interesting solution. I don't think Aereo is some evil, Kim.com, wringing his hands together in the corner type of deal here. They just lost, and I hope, and it does stifle innovation around those basic cable channels. But hopefully this might be a catalyst. The idea of not being, the idea of being best, not first. Maybe Aereo will be a catalyst to maybe push this forward a little bit and at least get those main cable networks thinking a bit about how they could better cater to customers.
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting, you mentioned the dissent opinion. It was written by justices. It was written by Alito, I believe it was, who, if you'll recall, actually recused himself from the case previously. It was Scalia, Thomas, and Alito. Those are the 3 most conservative judges on the court, pretty much. There's not much dispute that they are at least among the most conservative. What's interesting about the dissent is that in it, the dissenters said
conservatives would go
that they felt and they agreed.
Correct? Going down party line, so to speak, generally speaking.
Yeah. And well, in this case, actually, copyright has been kind of, so to date, it has been really more of a bipartisan issue. It's been one of the few issues that's really worked on the bipartisan level, even with Congress the way it is. But typically speaking, conservative justices take a more literal interpretation of the law and a literal interpretation of legislation and the Constitution, where the less conservative ones are more open to looking at things like legislative intent and so forth and making the rulings. And that's actually where a lot of the majority opinion came from, which was that was penned by Stephen Breyer. But the thing about the dissent that I found interesting was that the dissenters said they feel that Aereo should be stopped from doing what it's doing. They feel that Aereo is doing something wrong. What they wanted was either A, for the case to be sent back down to the lower court, for the broadcasters to make different copyright arguments, or B, for a legislative solution to the problem, saying that current copyright, this was a sort of a twisting of copyright law to fit the facts, rather than a judgment of the facts of copyright law as it's written.
Just a small clarification. You mentioned, I think, Alito that wrote it, but I think it was actually Scalia who wrote the dissent.
It was Scalia. It was Scalia. I misspoke on that.
And he was joined by Alito and one other,
Scalia.
but yeah, he wrote it. Interesting.
Now, I meant to say Alito was the one that recused himself.
Gotcha. Okay.
Everyone thought that when he came back on board, that was a big win for the broadcasters, but he ended up siding with Aereo in this one. Everyone thought Alito was a big win, conservative judge, would be a huge win, and a lot of people thought that. Well, it turned out he was not a huge get for the broadcasters.
Yeah.
Thank you for catching that.
No, that's all right.
Trying to go through the alphabet soup of names.
Yeah, I was just looking through. SCOTUSblog.com.
Yeah, and SCOTUS blog did a really good job covering it, I think. But yeah, the ruling was pretty emphatic that what Aereo is doing is unlawful and is infringing. I mean, but at the same time, it seemed like the majority opinion really tried to limit it, trying to make it clear that nothing fact-specific ruling applying to Aereo and not really anyone else. But of course, there's always the fear of how will this
and that's a tricky line to toe
down the road,
because
yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I think it's tricky. Sorry for the delay here. I'm just starting to talk over you. I can feel it now, but it's tricky because if you break Aereo down, you see content that's provided to the public for free. If you have an antenna, content you can record onto a DVR if you so choose. If you have the DVR, so what Aereo did was they basically have a warehouse where they have the antenna, they have the DVR, pay them to access that and to maintain it. And there's different applications where that could be problematic. And so, I think it's interesting to watch this down the road. I think they're going to be careful about it, but I don't think it's a concern, or I don't think it's misguided to think that a service that in this manner could potentially have negative repercussions for other services, cloud services, anything web hosting related, anything where content is broadcasted. It's tough. So, like I said, I guess they're going to try to make it clear and make sure it only applies to Aereo, but hopefully it doesn't apply to anything else down the road, and so people can continue to find new ways to work with content. And let's face it, to I don't know if exploit's the right word, but find creative instances within what is sometimes an antiquated law, and maybe help push those laws forward even.
Yeah, and that's, I think, going to be the challenge moving forward, is how is this going to be applied and interpreted. But that being said, I don't think this is like the Grokster ruling, right, in which the justices fully intended to create a new standard, a new metric, etc., that was going to drastically reshape liability for startups and for hosts and so forth. That ruling, they set out from the beginning to lay down a new metric, a new rubric, if you will, and I don't think that's the case here. I think they're trying to avoid that in this. And how successful they are, as you note, is going to be tough to see. That history will decide that one. But I think they're going to be more successful with this than definitely the times they've intentionally tried to change the way the law is interpreted. So, like I said, I think the impact of this is going to be fairly limited, but I definitely would still be paying attention to it. Now, what's I think going to be interesting with this moving forward is other TV-oriented startups, and TV, and also I would say radio and other startups focusing on capturing over-the-air broadcast content and shooting it out to users over the internet. But I don't think radio is going to see as huge of an impact. We already have most radio stations being online to some degree or another. But yeah, TV. This is if you're interested in that, willing to focus on.
Yeah.
Real fast, I have not heard or read or seen anything about Film On and all this. Have you by any chance?
Who?
Film On. our good friends at Filmon / Aereo Killer / Aereo Killer X. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was being deadpan.
Having a joke. And I thought the connection was messing up. Yeah, I have not.
Yeah,
I
don't know. I don't. Obviously, that doesn't bode well for Film on X. But what has boded well for Film on X, right?
Yeah, really, it doesn't change anything for them because they've already lost pretty much, everything up to this point. They have had the exact opposite of success in courts. So really, I think this just basically brings Aereo down to their level in a weird way.
Yeah, in a weird way, I would say. I still don't consider them at the same level, but legally they can't operate with these over-the-air channels, obviously.
Well, I meant legally the same level, not every other way. Yeah. So my hope is that we will we'll get more clarity on this soon. Obviously, right now there's not a lot of detailed analysis on this opinion. It was just announced earlier today, but hopefully we'll learn more about it, have some time to process it, and we'll get some other feedback and other input. Maybe next week we'll be able to come around and do even more discussion on it. But Patrick, I've got to play a game with you.
Okay. Is it called,
where were you when the Aereo ruling was handed down? Yeah, that's how it feels.
No, I got your question. I was actually just sitting here in the hotel room, and CNBC was on, and they kind of went through it as it happened. And what they were actually citing was SCOTUSblog.com. That's where they were getting their breaking story, was SCOTUSblog.com. And then they had someone, I guess, in front of the steps where the Supreme Court made the ruling, and that person was kind of siphoning out information. But they were taking their main summaries from SCOTUSblog.com. So that site, I think, is actually quite influential. I don't know if I've heard of them before, but they seem to be the one leading the coverage.
Yeah, they really were, and a lot of sites in the initial aftermath of the announcement quoted SCOTUSblog. SCOTUSblog, as part of their live blog, made a kind of off-the-cuff statement about how it was a sweeping ruling and this and that. And I think a lot of people ran with that and kind of assumed that it was a broad ruling that was going to impact all of the technology sector, even though by sweeping they meant sweeping for Aereo, not sweeping for everyone else.
Yeah.
Now, as for me, I was on the treadmill. I was actually working on a 5K. About 2 miles in, I get some dings on my phone, and it's the AP news alerts on my phone letting me know that not only the Aereo decision, but the cell phone decision had been handed down. And so I'm sitting there running, trying to scramble and get news about what's going on, and trying to find out the exact split, because I had something of a wager with a friend of mine locally, Devin Hartline, here about it. And long story short, I won, is what it comes down to. So yeah, Devin Hartline on Twitter at username Devin Hartline. He runs the Law Theories blog. Great guy, actually going for his PhD in law. Very, very smart copyright guy, but was wrong about the split. It was 6-3, so he owes me a beer sometime next week.
Here's what I want to know.
That's my gloat. I'm done.
Jonathan, know about, because I think we talked about this story a lot here. But about your trip, I want to know, did you see the tweet that I sent you about the Redskins?
Yes, I did. I did see the tweet. I saw a few other tweets about it too. A lot of people actually were hitting me up about it.
Okay, and you know.
Yeah, and
you know, I was just trying to annoy you, right?
Yeah, I know. I knew what you were doing.
Yeah, because I didn't get a response.
Others were hitting me up actually seriously,
you kind of
though.
just shaking your head and saying, "Oh
I
yeah, I'm not
you
even
knew
going
better.
to give you a response because it's so ridiculous."
Yeah, no, I wasn't able to really respond effectively to tweets and so forth because I had the stream going of the 6 IPC stuff. So a lot of stuff got lost in there, I admit. But yeah, I did see it.
For anyone listening now, what I did, I'm looking for the tweet right now, but I sent something like, oh gosh, where the heck is it? Let me find the exact tweet. It must be on the screen here. Yeah. I just tweeted out, the Redskins lost the copyright to their own name at Plagiarism today because Jonathan has a thing where he doesn't like when people refer to copyright as trademark and trademark as copyright, and so he'll call people out on Twitter about it and whatnot. And so the Redskins were stripped of their federal trademark protection in mid-June. And that's what I was referencing, was that I said they lost the copyright to their own name. And I actually did a quick Twitter search, and it wasn't that bad, but there was a lot of things like they lost their patent, they lost their copyright, they lost their copyright patent, they lost their copyright trademark, and you know, terminology like that, all of which is incorrect. But yeah, I just knew Jonathan. It was probably like chalk on a, you know, grading against a chalkboard.
Yeah, it's actually somewhat interesting because this actually happened before to the Redskins, but the Redskins had it overturned in district court. Now, whether or not that'll happen again this time, I don't know. And part of the problem is the standard of what is or is not a disparaging trademark obviously changes.
Right.
You go back to the 1960s, there are a lot of things you probably could have trademarked that you could not trademark today for that reason.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So obviously that's a goalpost moving situation there. I'm not an expert on it. I'm certainly not an expert on how not to offend people, as I'm constantly reminded. So
well, I think
I'm not going to weigh in on it too heavily, but long and short of it is, it's an interesting case, but the Redskins, I think, still have another recourse here, and they can still use the marks while they're waiting for that. So that's our aside in the trademark for the day.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting. It will be closely followed, and like I said, their victory previously on this doesn't necessarily guarantee victory in 2014 because terms mean different things and have different levels of offensiveness at different points in time.
Yeah.
You know, just read anything written in the 1920s or the 1940s even. Like, frankly, are you familiar with the Batman movie serial? Basically, it was the first time Batman, the character Batman, was ever on film, to my understanding knowledge. Yeah. The race, it deals with, because it was during the Middle War II, it deals with a Japanese villain, and we'll just say that a lot of the language, the racial language used is uncomfortable to 2014 ears. You know, it's one of those things.
Batman, so no! Like okay, I get it now, Batman. Your parents, you deserve to lose your parent. Never mind.
No. I don't think it was quite that bad. I don't think he deserved to have his parents killed, but yeah. Did they actually? I'm trying to remember if they actually touched on his parents.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a later invention or what that was. I don't know anything about that. I mean, I don't think it was a later. We need a Batman historian on the show right now, but it seemed like, especially in like the 1960s TV series and the earlier stuff, they kind of, it was in there, maybe it was in the lexicon, but they didn't raise it because those were meant to be more upbeat shows. Yeah.
And talking about, you know, both of his parents getting brutally murdered in an alley behind them in the theater, it's kind of a downer. Just saying, a little bit of a downer. So, you know, one of those things.
To this next story,
well,
so let's go.
We've still got a fair amount of time left, Patrick. You want to quickly?
Yeah, let's get through them.
Let's go. We do have other stories. Let's get through them. Okay. Well, on that note, I'm trying to find my show notes because I kind of got away from.
So Sherlock Holmes.
Well, first off, this week an important one from the Seventh Circuit. Sherlock Holmes, Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled in favor of an editor who was attempting to make a compilation of sort of fan fiction stories based upon the iconic character. The Seventh Circuit Court has ruled, and by the way, the ruling was written by a friend of the podcast, Judge Richard Posner. Not really a friend of the podcast, I just say that jokingly, but well-known face to podcast listeners, Judge Richard Posner, who said, what this has to do with copyright eludes us. But long and short, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed a lower court ruling that the Sherlock Holmes character, by and large, is in the public domain. The only thing not in the public domain to do with Sherlock Holmes are just 10 of his stories, which were written after 1922 and are still protected under copyright. And those are not particularly important to the Holmesian character. not a lot of new information came out by then.
Yeah, this went pretty much as we were talking. It would probably go, I think. And one thing I was going to mention that's relevant was that I've been watching some of the old Sherlock Holmes, Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes. And I've been watching those because they're on Amazon and stuff. I've been enjoying those. I like them. Amazon actually has them on the downloadable service with Prime. If you have a Kindle Fire HDX, you can download them, watch them offline. So I've been picking them up that way. But that span, he made 14 films from 1939 to 1946 as Sherlock Holmes. And I was thinking about copyright as I was watching those, and how and what the situation is with that, who it's passed to. I haven't looked into it, but I was just thinking about it. But yeah, I'm enjoying those old Sherlock Holmes mysteries. They're not all on Amazon, but like 6 of them are, I want to say, out of the 14. And so it's I'm enjoying them. Pretty neat.
I like the Basil Rathbone ones, but I've got to admit I'm more a fan of the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes from the A&E series that they did for a long time. When I think Sherlock Holmes, that's who I think of as Jeremy Brett. So rest in peace, Jeremy Brett. But yeah, I don't know if that's on Amazon Prime or Netflix or anything like that. It would be really, really great if it is. I actually have the box set DVD floating around here.
Yeah, I don't think it is on it. I looked around for some Sherlock Holmes stuff, and I don't think it is on there. I did come across the, obviously Brett and stuff in Googling, but not on the streaming service.
Okay. Well, hopefully someday it will become available on one of the series, at least some of the episodes, just so I can introduce other people to it without having to buy the box set. I remember a few years ago I actually bought my mom the complete box set of DVDs for her as a birthday present, and my mom loved me very much for that. That was a very good present for her.
You know what DVDs I bought my mom?
But so yeah, we're Jeremy Brett.
Years for Mother's Day and stuff, or birthday. 2 things come to mind: the Young Ones and Keeping Up Appearances. I'm not sure if you're familiar with either of those shows.
Oh, very familiar with it. That's I'm very familiar with Keeping Up Appearances, especially. That's a great British sitcom. With the buckets.
That's the one.
It's Bouquet. It's Bouquet.
Yeah.
Yeah, very familiar with it. Loved it. That was part of the late PBS late night British comedy hour. It was Are You Being Served? Red Dwarf. A lot of great shows in that block. Well worth. In all those comedies, by the way, absolutely excellent. I'm a huge Red Dwarf fan. Crystal introduced me to it. I'm realizing I had seen a couple episodes before, but definitely one you should check out. Red Dwarf, but yeah, that was a great time for PBS, back when PBS would actually air that stuff regularly. Not so true these days, it seems. But oh well. Now you have the BBC in America, which doesn't actually air it either. Yeah. So... moving on, yeah, there's not really much else we can say about that one, so we'll talk about George Clinton and his recent shindig. Now, George Clinton apparently owes a pretty sizable amount of money to a law firm in the neighborhood of $1.8 million. And he is either unable, unwilling, or whatever to pay it. And as a result of that, after an arbitration, the judge has ordered that the copyrights to 3 of his songs, and they are One Nation Under a Groove, Hardcore Jollies, and Uncle Jam Wants You. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 songs. The Electric Spanking of War Babies. Don't you love these titles?
Wow.
They're just like epic. I don't know much about George Clinton or funk music in general, but those are epic titles. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing out. But the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed a ruling to transfer the copyrights to those songs to the law firm in lieu of payment. Now, this is interesting because copyright law forbids the forced transfer of copyright, except in cases where it has previously been voluntarily transferred. So basically, if I transfer my copyright to someone else, I obtain it back, the court can then force it from me and give it to someone else in this type of situation. Now, the court had ruled that George Clinton had made those songs as a work for hire under his label. Now, that is a pretty important ruling, especially coming from the Ninth Circuit, because it bodes very, very poorly for other musicians who are trying to do copyright termination and secure their rights and get control of their music back. Long story short there, Copyright Act signed in 1976, took effect in 1978, allows musicians and other artists, after a set number of years, to terminate any licenses and agreements they had in their music and their work and get those rights back exclusively. This way, if you, for example, create a work and it becomes, sell the rights to it and it becomes absolutely gangbusters, you get a chance to reclaim it, renegotiate your rights to it, and reap the benefits from it. Well, that doesn't apply if it's a work for hire, and the fact that George Clinton's music was ruled a work for hire doesn't bode well for other musicians in similar situations trying to terminate their copyright agreements with labels to negotiate better rates.
Yes.
That's a mouthful.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I did read through the article that the appeals court circuit declined to get into kind of the really strong details of termination provisions of copyright law. And so they're trying to rule, maybe not to compare it to Aereo wouldn't be accurate, but in a similar way they're trying to rule it specifically to Clinton's case, more so than trying to make an overall statement. Now, if people won't use it that way, or will they use it that way, is a whole other thing. But they're trying to just make it about Clinton.
Yeah, and obviously they are, but I mean, but as with the Supreme Court, an appellate court has a lot of weight to throw around, and it sometimes can throw that weight around accidentally.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I suspect the Ninth Circuit is going to have to revisit this again eventually. It's going to come back up. They're the California Circuit. Obviously, this is going to come back up. They're going to have to actually rule directly on the issue of work for hire and whether or not copyright termination is allowed for musicians. And so they're kind of punting by doing that, but the indication here is one that they are at least skeptical that artists have that ability and have that right.
Yeah, and eventually, so, this sort of termination things probably end up at the Supreme Court level.
Absolutely. It may not. In fact, we're talking about that next. But we're not talking about it with music. We're talking about it with Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby is a legend in the comic book world, creator of Spider-Man, the X-Men. I think it was Incredible Hulk, Thor, a bunch of others. Basically, like half the Avengers, all the X-Men. Pretty diverse group of characters he created or helped create. Well, his estate has been going through the similar copyright termination fight with Marvel, and the lower courts have ruled against him, both at the district and appellate level, saying, hey, look, it's obvious to us that his relationship with Marvel was one of an employee-employer relationship, meaning it was a work for hire. Therefore, these works do not qualify for copyright termination. However, the estate, I should say, is now appealing this to the Supreme Court. And even though there's no real circuit split, there seems to be some interest in the court of taking. And the court did take the Aereo case, for example, without a circuit split, so you don't always have to have that divide. But the long and short of it is, in the Kirby case, Kirby's estate has been getting a lot of support from some very, very, very powerful and prominent figures. It's gotten, this article in the Hollywood Reporter just covers some of it. Bruce Lehman, the former director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, as well as well-known comic book historian, not well-known by me, but well-known by others, Mark Evanier, the comic book historian, but also various Hollywood guilds, the Screen Actors Guild, the Writers Guild, and the Directors Guild have all filed briefs in support of the Kirby estate and encouraging the Supreme Court to take the matter up. So there seems to be decent indication the Supreme Court might actually decide to take this one up and listen to it.
Yeah, that pretty much says it. The letter authored by Lehman is on behalf of former Register of Copyrights Ralph Oman, Artist Rights Society, International Intellectual. Well, that's a tough double there. International Intellectual Property Institute, as well as others. So, Yeah, I mean, it feels like Kirby's case, or the case of his estate, I should say, wasn't going very well. I mean, from the talking about it on the show, it continually seemed like it just wasn't going well for them. It just wasn't happening. But it doesn't hurt to have some people of varying backgrounds behind you, not just artist rights companies, not just lobbying groups, not just comic book folks, but also people like a former director of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, like a former registrar of copyrights. So it seems like there's a varying audience getting behind Kirby to some extent, and that can only bode well for them and give their case a boost, some extra life.
Yeah, and it's like you said, this case prior to these briefs was not going well at all. They were getting trounced at every level, it seemed, and it, frankly, as you said, looked bad. But now they've gotten some very broad support, and the reason I think for that is there's a lot of interest in this copyright termination issue, and as a result of that, a wide range of people are coming forward wanting clarification and clarity on it. This is going to be the hot copyright issue, I think, for the next 5 years or so, or maybe a little bit less than that, depending on how quickly it's resolved. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, this is what people need to know immediately. Billions of dollars hangs on the line, not just with this, but with musicians. Like we talked about George Clinton, we talked about plenty of other musicians in similar fights, and we're even talking next about Smokey Robinson and his problems with copyright termination, though his takes a slightly different twist, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Long and short of his is that Smokey Robinson is, as other musicians are, seeking to terminate his prior agreements with record labels and seeking to reclaim the rights to his music. However, his ex-wife, Claudette, is wanting a piece of that. According to Claudette, when they divorced, and when did they divorce? Is it?
30 years
I know
ago.
It's in this article, and I just lost sight of. 30. It was some time ago. It was a lengthy time ago. But when they divorced, there was no agreement about how to divide the music royalties up. They had an agreement for how to divide the royalties up, rather, but not the rights should he successfully complete copyright termination and reclaim those rights. She, as you might imagine, wants a share of those rights, whether it's half or whatever. She wants a share of those rights. Smokey Robinson says she's not owed that, and that dispute places a pretty interesting head-to-head conflict between federal law, federal copyright law, and state family law in this particular dispute that it seems like it's going to be going on for a while here.
Yeah, I find both sides interesting here. I find the argument interesting that this is essentially a new right that he didn't have back when this agreement was made. I mean, he's recapturing a right. I find it interesting that the argument on the other side that his wife doesn't, I'm going to quote here, seek to interfere with whether or under what terms Mr. Robinson enters into new grants for or sells the compositions now that they have been exposed to the market and confessed the fair value Congress legislatively made available to him. Mr. Robinson must simply honor his separate, non-preemptive state law contractual obligations with his former wife for 27 years. So she's basically saying he can do what he wants. He can reclaim his rights. He can sell his rights. I just am supposed to get 50%. Two separate parts of the law, and they don't interfere. I find them both. I find it to be an interesting narrative to this particular issue that we're dealing with right now legally, copyright termination, recapturing of rights, and it's a little different than the run-of-the-mill story that we've been running with for a while here and talking about over and over again. It's more intriguing, I think, to some extent because it is more unique.
Yeah, it is, and basically what Claudette Robinson is arguing is that the financial benefits of the Copyright Act are separate from the actual Copyright Act, and that the financial parts are sort of covered by state law, so there's no conflict between federal and state law. As you said, she's not intervening in any way in the federal parts. Like I said, Smokey Robinson can do whatever he wants. He can not reclaim, he can terminate, he can sell them, he can do whatever, but she wants that financial benefit, and that's where the issue lies. She claims that's different from the Copyright Act. Smokey Robinson's claiming it's part of the Copyright Act, and therefore copyright termination should give him sole dominion over those rights with none for his ex-wife, basically. And yeah, both sides, I think, have an interesting point. It's going to be something for the courts to decide on this one. I don't envy that judge. That's what it comes down to.
Can't we just run everything up to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, we should. I think we totally should right now. Everything just right up to the Supreme Court. I mean, that's where it's going to wind up anyway. And this copyright termination stuff, that's definitely where it's going to wind up. I almost guarantee you that it will wind up in the Supreme Court's hands in some capacity in the next, say, decade or so. I mean, it's almost certainly going to wind up there. Well, this next story is really interesting. We've talked about the Tough America lawsuits. They are a label of sorts that's really well known for buying the rights to a lot of these obscure bands and then tracking down unlicensed samples of their music. And they did that with a band called Trouble Funk. And they basically tracked some samples back to the Beastie Boys and the album Paul's Boutique, which was littered with uncleared samples because it was 1989 and sample clearance wasn't really a thing. That's a much more recent phenomenon. Well, the Beastie Boys, through their attorneys, have filed a motion for summary judgment on very unusual grounds. Basically, they're saying that Tough America does not have the rights to file this lawsuit, and that basically the agreement that they have with the band Trouble Funk is preempted by another agreement with Universal Affiliate Island in 1984 that was updated in 1989. Tough America supposedly acquired the rights in 1999. So 10 years before this agreement supposedly took place, the band members from Trouble Funk supposedly signed another agreement giving sole rights to Island Records, and nothing has changed that. Meaning Tough America has no legal standing with which to make this case. And if so, that could definitely end this lawsuit. Without really answering any of the issues, of course.
No.
I mean, then so basically the copyright issues don't get answered, but Beastie Boys are still off the hook. And it's interesting, the original reporting from the Hollywood Reporter indicated that if they win on this summary judgment, they will have sort of something of a trifecta here. A settlement, a summary judgment, and a trial, all within the span of a year, or less than a year. Actually, less than about 6 months. Because you've got the Goldie Blocks case, the Monster Energy case, and now this. That's like legal Yahtzee.
Yeah, as soon as you die, the vultures just fly in.
It seems to be the case. It really does.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I want
it's
to say,
kinda frustrating,
clear up
but,
being facetious. I'm not calling all these companies vultures, but yeah, I mean, the Beastie Boys, man, they seem to be constantly under some sort of legal scrutiny recently, whether it be Goldie Blocks or, like you said, Monster or this case. But yeah, I mean, Tough America. I think it's interesting that it's labeled by Rolling Stone Copyright Administration Company. It's like a different business now. You know, we've had copyright administration companies, which I think is a fancy term. You know, it's an accurate term, I guess. Really, it breaks down what they do. They're not really a record label, are they? They're not really an artist, are they? They're not really a publisher so much. I mean, they're a copyright administration company. They buy copyrights and they administer them.
Yeah, and to what end? They don't really license them, from what I've gathered. I don't think you can buy a license from Tough America that I've found. It's just, yeah, they basically track down these. They're tough and they're American. Yeah, that's it. But what I can tell is they track down these samples and they go after them legally, and that seems to be the extent of it. So there you go. So we'll see how that one turns out. It seems like the logic is pretty solid. And since we're actually in danger of finishing on time this week, we'll make this last one short. But the special 301 report has been released this week. The United States Trade Representative did indeed, despite early indications that they wouldn't, in an early preview saying they wouldn't, add India to the piracy, to the watch list, not the priority watch list, but to the watch list, and have removed both the Philippines and Italy, citing copyright improvements to the copyright climate in those countries there. And even though they continue to put China on there, they have said that there have been improvements in the country, noting that Baidu in particular has made strides in improving its copyright situation. The Chinese search engine Baidu has made significant improvements, and that is no longer in the notorious markets. So, you know, the addition of India, if you're from India, obviously, or an Indian government, is worrisome. But it seems like this report actually deals a lot with progress rather than, you know, just how bad things are.
Yeah. I mean, the headline here, partially, well, the sub-headline, right? The headline for Alex Ben Block at The Hollywood Reporter is India joins China, Russia, Switzerland. Yeah. But the sub-headline is that Italy and the Philippines fell off the list. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely progress being made here, and some countries are moving forward and some countries are moving backward, which is always the story of the list, I guess. But I don't know. It just seems like some progress is being made here. Whether I don't know whether that's real progress or just to make it look like something's happening. I hope it's the former. But I guess it's good to see progress is progress.
Progress is indeed progress, and you know, even in the countries, like I said, with China and so forth, where they were kind of blasting, you know, their lack of effective enforcement, they were pointing out bright spots and things that were going well in those countries. Even in India, which they added to the list, they said there is a thriving movie studio, the thriving movie production culture there, and there seems to be a lot of new interest and new motivation on copyright there, basically. So it seems like even when they're, you know, talking trash, they're still highlighting some of the positives.
Yeah, and with Italy and the Philippines, it's worth noting that they've been on the list since 1989, or that was the, I don't know, for the first time in its 25-year history of the list, Italy and the Philippines have been taken off the list, according to the article.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty significant improvement. I'd rather focus on the positives than the negatives with this one, personally. Yes, India's on it, and India's high up, but still, overall, I would argue there's evidence that a lot of countries have made a lot of progress. Well, Patrick, you have seen me on your vacation, on your trip away. You're from a hotel room with bad Wi-Fi and a terrible delay. I want to thank you for that and ask you, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, you're welcome. My pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thanks for moving stuff around. And no, I have nothing else to add.
On that note, we should... Okay, well, on that note, we will definitely wrap it up. My name is Jonathan Bailey. I'm from the website Plagiarism Today, which can be found at plagiarismtoday.com. I'm also username Plagiarism Today on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, you name it, that's where I'm at.
The delay is killer. And I'm Patrick O'Keefe of the iFroggy Network. I blog at managingcommunities.com. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn as Patrick O'Keefe. And let me count to 3 here. 1, 2, 3. Let's see that delay.
1, 2. Oh. Yeah, the delay is pretty. It's pretty obnoxious still. But on that note, everyone, thank you very much for putting up with this heavily delayed podcast, and we will see you guys next week.